What is going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name is Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. Hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. Today, we're going to be giving a grade to the Toronto Blue Jays offseason. We'll be talking about each one of the three weaknesses that I think the Blue Jays came into this offseason trying to address, and we'll just be breaking down sort of if the Blue Jays actually did end up addressing those needs or not. So anyways, let's get into the video. The first sort of weakness that we have from the Blue Jays is probably the only one that the Jays actually did not address in this offseason, which is getting a number 2 starter. Now, I know the Blue Jays are still in the market, probably more likely in a trade scenario now to get that number 2 starter. But as of this current roster right now, the Blue Jays do not have that number 2 piece in the rotation that I think a lot of Blue Jays fans expect, to sort of be the difference maker of the Blue Jays potentially being a wild card team and them being able to make a legit push into contention. Now, the Blue Jays did enter the market, get some depthy starters, Steven Matz, Tyler Chatwood, who I think are both great pitchers, but they're more guys who are going to be competing for the number 5 spot in the rotation, I think, with guys like Anthony Kay, maybe Robbie Ray at the back end there, Ryan Barucki as well. Now, Steven Matz is a guy, I think, who could definitely break out. He's always had high expectations from the New York Mets. He's a guy who could slide right into the rotation and surprise people with a 4 ERA right around there, and I think that'd be a fantastic year. But I think, those guys are exactly the term that I used, a depthy starter, and they're not a number 2 piece in the Blue Jays rotation. And I think the Blue Jays have a ton of questions. They still need that piece if they really do want to push into contention. And I think the real question that you have to ask when talking about starters is, should the Blue Jays' top priority of this offseason have been a number 2 starter as opposed to going out and adding another middle infielder with a guy like Marcus Semien or going to the outfield? And, even though I think George Springer was a fantastic deal, I know that some people are saying, should they have gone for a number 2 starter first as opposed to addressing an outfield that you already have Gurriel, Teoscar Hernandez, and Grichuk in? Right? In theory, we probably could have made do with that. I just think it's the Blue Jays went into the offseason with the goal of adding the best players they possibly could. The Blue Jays went, they said, we have some money to spend this offseason. Let's get just the best player available who will come to Toronto. And that was George Springer. And I think, you can look at the back end sort of this offseason and look at, well, James Paxton went for a cheap deal. Taijuan Walker went a pretty cheap deal, and he was really good in our rotation last year. And because Jake Odorizzi is the only, big name left on the market, well, now we can't really get anybody. But I think, you can't really look at it like that, because I think when the Blue Jays actually did enter the free agency market for a starting pitcher, it was just too late. And at that point, it wasn't too late in the sense where they didn't have any options, because obviously Paxton and Taijuan Walker, guys like that, were still on the table. But I think it was too late in the sense that the Blue Jays just didn't have any more money to spend in their budget of the offseason, because they already went out and, again, spent money on the best players that they could possibly find for the most value deals. With that being said, I think they did have, an issue in the outfield. I think they had 3 depthy outfielders, but they needed that one, guy. They needed a big bat in the lineup. They needed an outfielder, just a big bat overall, who could add some protection in the lineup, add a bit of defense in the outfield. And I think they get that with George Springer, which is why I'm not mad about not addressing that starting pitching issue. Because in terms of, addressing some extra bats in the lineup, they definitely did that with George Springer. An MVP caliber outfielder who has been in MVP talks before, been a Silver Slugger before, and since he's really came into the league being one of the top outfielders in terms of how consistent he's been. And in his last full season in 2019, set his own career high in terms of home runs. So expecting big things from George Springer in the 2021 season. Definitely, I think in terms of the outfielding weakness, address that. In terms of Marcus Simeon, I think this is the one up in the air. Now, if you've watched some of my Blue Jays videos before, you know how highly I speak of Marcus Simeon, because even though he had a down year in 2020, this is a guy who finished 3rd in American League MVP votings in the 2019 season, a guy who could hit some home runs, and the Blue Jays really don't need him to bounce back fully. He's going to be able to get a qualifying offer from the Blue Jays next year, which could potentially lead to a draft pick. You're also looking at a guy who's only probably going to be batting 6 or 7 in this Blue Jays lineup. So you don't need the 2019 production. And I think, if Simeon gets back anywhere close to that, it's a steal. And I think, if you're getting a 30 home run hitter possibly in your number 7 spot, I mean, this is a really, really deep Blue Jays lineup. So, I don't think middle infielding was necessarily a weakness that the Blue Jays came into the offseason looking to address. But I do think Marcus Semien was definitely a good value deal. And, if we're following sort of what the Blue Jays, again, their plan just to add the best players for the best value this offseason, Marcus Semien definitely fits in line with that, in my opinion. The third weakness that I think the Blue Jays did have coming into the offseason was their bullpen. Losing Ken Giles didn't really pitch for us last year, but obviously, we were hoping you would be one of the best closing pitchers in all of baseball, at least in the American League. We didn't get to see that in the bullpen last year. Thankfully, some people stepped up. Jordan Romano, Anthony Bass also being one of those people, but obviously Bass isn't returning to the Blue Jays this season. So the Blue Jays really had Romano, Dolis. They had the depth guys, when we look at Merriweather, Baraki K, the same guys that we saw last year. But really the 7, 8, 9 innings were up for grabs. Kirby Yates going out, getting him was a fantastic move. 2018, 2019, one of the best closing pitchers in all of baseball. He had 41 saves in the 2019 season, which was his career high. And even though he didn't pitch in the 2020 season, it was a fairly cheap deal. And I think for, a Blue Jays team who had injuries in the bullpen last year, but also sort of issues in terms of managing their bullpen, I think, having a veteran closing pitcher who's been proven over the course of the past few years, putting him in the 9th inning, I think you're locked down. Leaves Romano in for the 8th inning spot. And, the jump he took last year in terms of increasing his velocity. Overall, he was just great last year, even though it was a shortened season. And then Dolis, I thought, was better in the second half of the season. And obviously a high velocity guy who can strike out people as well. So I'd love to see some consistency in that 7, 8, 9. And I think we're getting that, especially putting Kirby Yates there. And then obviously we got Tyler Chatwood, probably not going to make the rotation. Maybe a guy like Steven Matz as well that we're probably going to be putting in the bullpen on top of all those other guys. And I really like that. I mean, I've spoken about Tyler Chatwood before. A guy who's mostly been a starting pitcher over the course of his career, but a high strikeout guy. He's got great stuff. And I think a guy like Tyler Chatwood could be a high strikeout guy, possibly, in situational innings out of the bullpen. And I think statistically, you're going to see a big difference when Tyler Chatwood doesn't have to face a batting order multiple times, and now he's just facing multiple batters. And then as for Steven Matz, I think not having to put him in the rotation allows you to put him in the bullpen. I think, again, he's a quality pitcher, a guy who Mets fans have always had high hopes for. He's a guy who could be a project out of the bullpen, a guy who could develop into a starting pitcher. But overall, another great depth guy for the bullpen. So I don't think they've address that starting pitching need yet. Obviously, with some of the excess players they have, you got Grichuk, you got Kirk, you got Tellez, even Guerrero rotating in that DH spot. Obviously, you're not trading Guerrero, but the other 3 guys I think are all on the table. You have Groshans in the minors, some other middle infield and catching prospects that I think the Blue Jays could potentially package in a trade deal for another starter, a guy like Luis Castillo. Some of these guys that are available in the trade market, I think. How soon that would happen, I don't know. Do I think a trade will happen before the start of the season? No. I could see a trade potentially happening near the trade deadline when the Blue Jays just need that starter as they're pushing for a wild card spot or hopefully an American League East title. But in terms of their batting lineup, particularly in the outfield, absolutely addressed it. Bullpen, love the additions of the depthy pitchers, obviously Kirby Yates. As an overall grade for the Blue Jays, I would give them an A+. Even though they didn't address that starting pitching need, I think the Blue Jays have an opportunity, again, to enter the trade market when the time is right for them. And I think assuming that they ran out of budget at the end where they weren't able to get Taijuan Walker, where they weren't able to get James Paxton, I think for what the Blue Jays did have and the position that they're at right now in their organization, this is going to be a really exciting year for Blue Jays fans. And, obviously the Rays, the Red Sox have gotten a little bit better. You obviously got the Yankees at the top of the American League East. But don't count the Blue Jays out. This offseason, showed how smart Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro are in this Blue Jays front office. A lot different than what we saw historically from a guy like Alex Anthopoulos. And I think the Blue Jays, even though they might not be there yet, are definitely trending in the right direction. And what's so good about the Blue Jays is that they're always in the market for these guys who are great value. And I think they definitely showed that again in this offseason. But anyways, guys, if you did make it to this point in the video, I want to hear your thoughts on the Blue Jays offseason down in the comment section below. What grade would you give them so far over this 2020-2021 offseason? What do you expect for the Blue Jays in the upcoming Major League season? But if you did enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs for more content just like this. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you again next time.